Pierre came out with probably one of his best speeches ever today, and he dropped some real truth bombs about dealing with Donald Trump and the U.S. At the same time, he was able to embarrass Mark Carney and the Liberals, call them out for their bad actions and how they are destroying Canada's economy. Speaking of destroying the economy, the Liberals are getting caught red-handed that they have been lying to Canadians, manipulating them to be anti-American and pro-China, and it turns out that's sad and a very bad idea. We will have to get into that. But the next Liberal talking points have come out, and they are cheering on a very funny economic update. At the same time, we got a big update coming out of the U.S., which is interesting to see around manufacturing, and we also have a bit of a bombshell that immigration is actually a net negative to the economy against all of the Liberal manipulation, which is good to know as Mark Carney's heading to India. Of course, the media is covering for him there with their propaganda as well, but India is a concern for the U.S. We got a clip at the end of the video. It's a shared problem, guys. There's a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it.
The miner in Appalachia, the energy worker in Texas, the engineer in California, they do not wake up every day asking how they can stick it to the Canadians. That's just the reality. The American people are not our adversaries. In fact, survey results demonstrate that Americans overwhelmingly have a favorable view of Canada and consider our two nations to be friends. That goodwill, by the way, may be our most important strategic strength going into these talks.
The American people are not our adversaries. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been very tough on Pierre because historically he has had a horrible track record when it comes to immigration and Operation Caribou. Now, we can see he's always had the better grasp on what Canada needs from an economic, a regulation, and a bureaucracy standpoint. He understands that the major domestic changes need to be done. And now that we are seeing him try to build bridges and say, look, we have a unique relationship with Americans. Americans don't hate us. And even when we get to the clips where he's pushing back against Donald Trump and some of Donald Trump's statements, he's not doing it in an antagonistic way that we need to stick it to Trump and we need to, take on America. He even specifically says, and he uses Mark Carney's shifty little language, that we don't need to rupture the relationship. But let's continue on.
As President Kennedy said when he was addressing the Canadian Parliament, geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. Necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature hath so joined together, let no man put asunder.
Canada and the U.S. have the most unique relationship, and the geopolitical reality is that Canada absolutely does need the U.S., and there are so many benefits for the U.S. in working with Canada if Canada wants to work with the U.S. in a conducive way. If the bureaucracy in Canada were to get shut down and we said, look, let's find projects in which we can work together, which actually means a lot when we get to the economic update. There's some pretty funny stuff coming out of that, actually.
That insight captures a reality deeper than any temporary dispute. Canada's prosperity and security are inseparable from a stable relationship with the United States. And that is why we should not declare a permanent rupture with our biggest customer and closest neighbor in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with Beijing. A regime the Prime Minister himself said was the biggest threat to Canada just a year ago.
Not just the Prime Minister. So did CSIS, so did the RCMP, so did all the business organizations. Literally every single person was like, hey, probably not a good idea. And when we get into a bit more of the details, and even the Liberals admitting this, we can clearly see this manipulation was done to win the election. The Liberals wanted to collect power, and they got Canadians riled up against the Americans. They broke so much goodwill from America just to win an election, and now Canadians have that so beat down into their head. Canadians are so broken now mentally that they're cheering for Austin Matthews to get traded from the Leafs because he met with Donald Trump, the President of the United States.
And we seek no fight with China or its people, who make up a brilliant and extraordinary civilization. But its government and its proxies have kidnapped our citizens, stolen our technology, interfered in our elections, and pushed fentanyl into our streets. Canada should talk and trade where prudent, but never make the mistake of confusing engagement with dependency.
I agree.
China is not a substitute for the United States of America.
Never have been, never will be. And I actually agree with what he said. Like, China's an impressive country. They have a rich history. There is so much culture and awesome stuff that comes out of China. So if China wants to honeypot me, I'm open to it. I'd prefer to be honeypotted by the Russians if I had to choose between the two, but I'm open to either one, whatever one makes the best offer. And here he is, if you want to say pushing back against Donald Trump, you know, standing up to Donald Trump. And this is the clip that the media has been running with the most. And, oh, Pierre's really going after Trump. No, he didn't go after Trump. He didn't attack Trump. He drew a line and he said, here's my line. Here's the boundaries I'm willing to accept. And I disagree. And it's okay for him to say these things that he said here.
What President Trump says about Canada is wrong. Our trade surplus does not represent exploitation by Canada of the United States of America. Quite the opposite, in fact. It is the result of us selling very good and very well-priced, in fact, below market-priced raw materials, which America then upgrades and turns into massive profits for its economy. Ironically, U.S. workers gain six-figure salaries, turning our raw meat material into profit to their country, and they owe a big debt of gratitude to politicians and bureaucrats in Canada who have blocked us from building the necessary infrastructure to take those resources to world markets.
So that's actually kind of funny, because what he's saying is, like, Canada has been so mismanaged by liberals. Canada has been run so poorly. We've shut down so many of our domestic projects. We've shut down our innovation. We have shut down the ability to want to compete, to do anything. And now the U.S. has net benefited. And generally speaking, that's been a win for the U.S., which is true. I mean, we just compared the LNG yesterday. Canada sits on massive LNG reserves. We have not done anything about that. We've not taken it seriously. And now the U.S. is going to be one of the top global LNG producers, which, I mean, hey, shout out to the US. That's awesome, of course. Always happy to see a win. And in this situation, he's allowed to disagree with Trump. He is allowed to say, look, on policy, I don't think you're correct. I think this is what this means. Him disagreeing with Trump is not an attack on Trump. He's trying to stand up for Canada. He's trying to make an argument for Canada. And yeah, if he's saying he disagrees with Trump, it's not an attack. And I found this a way better way, because even the next stuff that he's going to say is obviously like, hey, Trump's wrong. Here's my line in the sand. I want to stand up for Canada. All of this is fine. It's not antagonistic to Trump. And we've got a clip right after of Doug the liberal slug who needs to take a lesson from this.
He's also wrong to ignore the sacrifices Canada has made for the United States. Canadians fought and died along Americans in Afghanistan. And let's be clear, we did that exclusively in response to an attack on our American neighbors. We also fought and bled along America, not just in the trenches of Western Europe, but in Alaska's Aleutian Islands, defending American territory in the Second World War. And of course, we joined rapidly to fight communism in Korea, and in countless other ways, our cooperation, whether it's NORAD or our efforts to secure the Arctic, have been beneficial to both countries. And let's be clear about another thing. The president's talk of 51st statehood, whether it is a joke or not, is unacceptable. It goes without saying there is zero chance of Canada ever being a part of the United States.
Look, he's a federal leader. He's allowed to say that. He's allowed, and he has to say this in Canada, because if he were to not make this statement in Canada, the liberal boomers would be spiraling. And he made a few good points there. And getting into, we didn't talk about the policy as much from these clips, but some of the things that he said, hey, look, we can get this Keystone Pipeline built. We can find ways to work with the U.S. securing the Arctic, making sure we work with the Americans when we integrate on these defensive plans, and everything is around securing North America. And it is a partnership still with a strong independent Canada where both countries work together. And basically, if you could only take away a couple points from his speech, is look, there's been disagreements, and a lot of those disagreements actually come from Canada being run poorly on the Canadian side. So he, for once, was willing to take ownership as a Canadian leader and said, look, we have done things wrong in Canada, but both countries win from working together. So his whole message was way less antagonistic. Even right here, the interviewer says like, "Hey, I noticed you're really calm and you're not being angry. Shouldn't you be more angry? The Canadians are heated. They're angry. The Canadians are heated and angry because they're being emotional babies. And the Liberal government has told them to be elbows up, and there's a rupture of the relationship, and we are specifically going to be moving away from the US to work with China." So him being like, "Hey, how does that help?" is another great clip.
What I take from your speech is that you're very calm. You have a very calm tone when it comes to talking about the United States. But Canadians are pretty angry about what's happening. So why aren't you angrier about this?
Well,
Why aren't you angrier?
because what would that do? Would that get the auto worker in Windsor working again? Would it allow people to put food on their table in Hamilton or the Sioux? We have to focus on what we can do and what we can control. That's all we can do. We can't control what the president has. And this is, by the way, something that Mark Carney has said, and I agree with him. He has said that we cannot control what the U.S. president says or does. We can control what we do on this side of the border in our own national interest. And by focusing on what we can control, then we can determine our own destiny.
Which is true, but the difference is Mark Carney fundamentally has somehow the worst possible ideas and only the choice of a managed decline for Canada. He's choosing to not actually take any action, not help Canadians, and I want to cheer for Pierre so bad whenever he gets in his own element about economics, working with the US, things that Canada needs to turn around. He does such a great job. He just needs to fix his immigration platforms, his immigration stances. All of his social stances are so unbelievably liberal, and he needs to kick out Tim Uppal, Jazz Raj, all of Operation Curry Bomb, who's in the party, controlling things, all of the Khalistanis, they gotta go. And then we could potentially start treating the Conservative Party as a serious Conservative Party again, if they can start to have some actual conservative platforms on the social side. And like I said, Doug, the liberal slug, Chub Ford himself, needs to take a page out of Pierre's book here because he's asked a question that has nothing to do with Donald Trump, and somehow needs to go out of his way to get in a little dig in to Donald Trump, uncalled for, unsolicited.
I like Olivia Chow. She's doing a good job, and we're going to continue working with her. So I forget about the politics. I don't care what political stripe you're from. If it's good for Ontario, we're going to work well together. If you attack Ontario, it's not going to be a good day for you, because I got to protect the people.
Good morning, Premier.
And that's a message to President Trump, too.
Trump was not involved in the question. Trump was not involved in this at all, and he just had to put it in.
I got to protect the people.
Good morning, Premier.
And that's a message to President Trump, too.
Well, thanks, Doug. That was helpful in mending fences. Now, getting into some more liberal shenanigans here, we have some awesome proof that the Liberals have been manipulating Canadians this entire time when it comes to being anti-America and pro-China, because not only does she admit that we have to work with America and working with China is bad, and just to put it in perspective, she is basically Canada's equivalent, and granted she's stepping down now, but she, for the last decade or longer, she has basically been Canada's equivalent of Nancy Pelosi, like that loud of a voice in the Democratic Party on that side. She has been either that loud of a voice on the Canadian side or more, because she was like Trudeau's right hand for like a decade, and it's crazy that we know, and she knew this entire time, the Liberals were lying. They did this to win, and they did such massive economic damage to Canada's economy. And you'll see that they're cowards and liars when I get into the next thing.
It really did hurt American manufacturing workers. He started to fix that, and that is a truth universally acknowledged, right? I think across the political spectrum, people think that. What is unfortunate.
She's talking about Donald Trump onshoring and wanting to reindustrialize. So he saw that the relationship with China was hurting Americans, was hurting production, and Trump was one of the first ones to call it out early.
Is all of this uncertainty, particularly from America's friends, when it comes to our relationship with America, the big winner is China.
Well, let's talk about China, because it strikes me that one of the things that your Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has done is traveled to China and negotiated some adjusted trade deals there. Is China the big winner here? By the way, China was not mentioned last night at the State of the Union, and it's been a long time since the U.S. president has not mentioned China in that speech.
Yeah, I think China was the big winner. And what is really ironic, and I personally would say is sad, is China today, when it talks to countries like Canada, is casting itself as the reliable partner. As a country that particularly middle powers like Canada can trust, can lean on, that if you do a deal with China, it's a deal that has meaning.
You're saying that too! The liberals have been saying exactly that! That China's a more reliable trading partner! So the fact that she's calling it sad that people are buying into this and saying, oh, you know what? China's actually the ones winning here as Canada and the US play against each other. You did this. You ran an entire campaign to say exactly this. You have done a 180 flip-flop. This is still, to this day, the liberal messaging that China is the more reliable trading partner. We can't trust the US. It's still the actual official messaging and stance of the party. But because she's stepping down, and now she's in Kiev, funny enough, now that she's stepping down, she's getting her payday. They're putting her out to pasture. She's got like 10 jobs lined up that she's just collecting salaries from. The corruption is hilarious. Now she's finally admitting the truth. Like, yeah, it's sad that we think China's more reliable than the US.
And China is also casting itself as the defender of this international order based on rules that the US created. Now,
you're doing that. Mark Carney said that.
My own view is we need to be a little bit skeptical of commitments from China to do that. I was foreign minister when, in retaliation for Canada's decision to honor an extradition treaty with the United States, 2 Canadians were illegally seized, arrested by China, effectively held hostage. International experts concluded that their treatment amounted to torture. That is not the behavior of a reliable partner. But for me, a really terrible thing that's happening right now is a lot of people, a lot of Canadians are now coming to the conclusion that Beijing can be trusted more than Washington. I think that's really sad, and I don't think that's in America's national interest.
You told the Canadians to think that. The liberals told the Canadians to think that. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. This is insane. This is the actual definition of gaslighting. To make this your messaging, to make this your platform, and then be like, you know what? I'm actually really sad that people are coming to this conclusion. It's crazy to me. They did the damage. They did the propaganda, the manipulation, and we're watching the manipulation continue. And we're seeing that same thing, the same messaging swap about China is happening with India right now. We will get into that in a second. But before we do, the liberals have been going nuts with this statistic all day. So this is Canada's finance minister, and he said, oh, foreign investment in Canada just hit its highest level since 2007. Our plan is working. It's all from America! It's American businesses coming in and buying Canadian businesses, and you're saying that's a win? Okay, so basically what has happened is they said, oh look, $96 billion has come into Canada from foreign direct investment. That $96 billion, $55 billion of it was straight up from the US, and it was just the US buying Canadian divisions of companies, or just buying Canadian infrastructure, Canadian oil companies, like mergers, acquisitions. It's just different levels of the US getting more ownership of Canada. So the liberal finance minister, who is directly talking about taking on the US and how we need to move away from dealing with the United States of America, is now cheering on that the US continues to buy Canadian companies. And no, it's not because the liberals are crushing it. They keep using, oh, it's the best since 2007. Well, adjusted for inflation, 2007 would be well over $200 billion of foreign investment in Canada. Right now, in 2026, we got $96 billion. So it's not even close to one of the top years since 2007 when adjusted for inflation. That's just straight up nominally it is. And the best part is it's so much just American investment buying Canadian assets that they are cheering on. And the best part is it's not actually increasing productivity because they're buying existing Canadian companies. They're not keeping extra profits in Canada. They're not increasing their investments in the actual machinery, the people, productivity, nothing like that. They're just buying ownership of Canadian companies, which, hey, obviously we're big US guys on the channel, so I don't have a problem with that, but it just goes to show the US is clearly still in so much better of a position than Canada is. We got this update here that the US economy is gaining momentum. Flatbed rejection rates have surged 40%, surpassing records from 2021 at the height of COVID. This sharp increase signals booming demand for industrial freight. Steel, lumber, and machinery, aka things that Donald Trump has put tariffs on to try and increase the domestic demand for the US. As carriers reject contract loads for higher paying spot shipments, it's a strong bullish indicator pointing to accelerating activity in manufacturing, construction, and heavy industry across the US, and that's why I continue to say the US is on the upward trajectory. Yes, there are a lot of factories being built. Obviously, there's construction jobs happening, but there are more jobs coming down the pipe, but the liberals just don't understand the economy. They just don't understand, and they don't want to admit any of their mistakes, because we've got Canada's trade minister doing his rounds right now. Oh, you know, the GDP, it's not performing as well as we would like. A lot of it, of course, has to do with Donald Trump and his tariffs and, you know, some of the regulation and the bureaucracy that we're dealing with domestically inside of Canada. And so the GDP is not performing how we would like. It's not performing how you would like because you are using Operation Carney Bomb and unlimited mass immigration as the only way to grow Canada's economy. And now, thanks to Riley Donovan putting out this tweet here, we are seeing zero population growth projected for 2026 amid outflow of temporary residents and immigration cuts. Bad news for cheap labor bosses, slumlords, diploma mills, condo speculators, real estate developers, banks, Century Initiative, and Tim Hortons. Some people call it Sing Hortons. One quick little note there. It's actually not that bad of news for banks so far. The banks are having record profits right now, and it's because, once again, as we continue to say on the channel, Canadians pay the highest banking fees in the developed world. So yes, even though it's bad news for all these people, it is great news for Canadians. And then it shows the chart here, which has us at close to 0% population growth. However, major caveat here, Canada's population right now is 41 million when we should only be at closer to 36 million based on historical growth trends. So we still have millions of too many people. So we still need to keep the pressure on about this. This is like eating 3 pizzas for lunch and then only eating a protein bar for dinner and being like, oh, I had a pretty light dinner. You still ate too much on the day. You got to cut back because we realistically do need to lose a couple million people, and that is the only way we are going to save Canada as a nation, Canada as an identity. The only way that Canada will actively be able to have a cohesive society and rebuild, have productivity again, invest in our workers, innovation, is if we have millions of people leave, and especially as we continue to get more information now. And thanks for the White Papers Policy Institute for putting this out. We get more information that almost always immigration has been a net negative when extrapolated out over time. And it's why I keep using the analogy. It's like trying to get all your energy through doing drugs. You're surely going to get some energy for a little bit, but eventually you're going to pay for it. And based on current spending figures, the Netherlands will spend $980 billion on its non-Western immigrant and immigrant-descended population over the next 50 years. That's why, again, these things take time. If the Dutch paid for each of the 2.5 million non-Western immigrants 100,000 euros to leave, it would save them 760 billion euros. Remigration is cheaper than hosting immigrants and their children indefinitely. I say this all the time. It would be short-term pain for long-term gain when we extrapolate out the protection. I'm not even an anti-government spending guy. I'm not even an anti-government programs guy. What I am is an anti-government fraud, an anti-government abuse, an anti-government, waste of money when it's completely mismanagement and it's not going to Canadians. I want Canadians to have access to universal health care. I've never had a problem with that. I support it. But the fact is, we have millions and millions of people who are coming into Canada, mostly through Operation Carney Bomb, who are abusing those systems, clogging up the systems. They are wasting government money. There's so much fraud involved. So if I knew it was going to Canadians, I wouldn't care anywhere near as much. But speaking of Operation Carney Bomb, hey buddy, how doing? We've got this clip here, and they're saying they're already carrying so much water for the government of Canada, saying like, oh, you know what? Maybe we could have a shift in tone in dealing with India. Maybe they're actually good guys over there. They're not trying to hurt us or, doing any sort of election interference or anything at all, for sure.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us on CTV News Channel. I'm Scott Hurst. We begin with a live look at the nation's capital on this Thursday morning. Prime Minister Mark Carney is set to take off in about an hour's time on a 9-day trade mission. Carney is set to visit Australia and Japan after his first stop in India. This trip to India begins as Ottawa suddenly shifts its position on alleged foreign interference. Canada previously accused India of being behind violent crimes taking place in this country. That position seems to have changed.
Oh yeah, they're definitely not doing that at all. India is not responsible for the crime spree in Canada at all. Just wait for the next clip, because surely that won't be applicable. Don't worry.
For more on this, let's bring in CTV's Abigail Beeman live at the Ottawa International Airport. Abigail, thanks so much for your time. Now, relations with India have been tense over the past few years, but the government is signaling a shift in tone. What more do we know?
And before she gets into her statements, it's very important for us to remember we just watched the government do a 180 on China. It's flip-flop, snip, snap, snip, snap. They are going back and forth, whatever they have to do to manipulate Canadians, because Canadians are the most propagandized and easily manipulated population in the world, I guess, because they see these stories and they go, yep, government good. That means we have to listen. So they will just take their marching orders. And now, if the marching orders are actually India is very good, hey buddy, how doing?
Well, this was really a remarkable development that happened in a background briefing reporters received. I was one of them ahead of the trip, where a senior government official sort of suggested that this kind of activity, and I'll get into what kind of activity in a moment, but that this kind of activity is no longer happening and that trip would not be taking place if it was. Reporters pressed the officials over and over again to sort of detail or define that further, and they were reluctant or hesitant to give more details. But to set the stage here, a number of bodies, the RCMP, the former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, accused the Indian government of being linked to violence on Canadian soil. 4 Indian nationals are currently standing trial at the BC Supreme Court in the murder of a Canadian Sikh activist.
He's not Canadian, but go on, lady.
A foreign interference committee determined that India was the second biggest threat in terms of electoral foreign interference in Canada.
Second biggest threat, and even their wording was they're not doing it anymore. So that implicitly says, hey, they used to do it. They used to manipulate our elections. They were running some foreign interference, and sure, they were doing a few clandestine murders on Canadian soil, but, operating some 1,000-year-old blood feuds. Who hasn't? But, they promised us they're not going to do it anymore.
Canada. CSIS has said publicly that India is one of the main perpetrators of foreign interference and espionage in Canada. But again, at this briefing, a government official said that conversations with the Indian government are now productive, and they do not believe that this kind of activity is still taking place.
We're allowed to call that retarded, right? The idea is, hey, every security agency has said that they are one of the biggest threats to Canada. But now the Indians from India are saying, hey, buddy, how doing? You can trust us. How doing? We promise. Hey, buddy, listen, we used to interfere with your election. No problem. Hey, buddy, how doing? We are very, very serious, buddy. How doing? We are stopping interfering with your election. And then here we have these stories where it looks like some of the cases continue in Canada. It seems like the behavior of the Indian diaspora seems to continue.
Conditions have already cooled the real estate market, but in Surrey, some say there's an added chill.
People are in fear. Trust me.
Realtor Birinder Sidhu says extortion-related violence is making some buyers think twice about moving to Surrey.
When you work with the buyers as a realtor, you have to disclose everything to them. Even there is any shooting in the neighborhood, that will create a lot of fear in their mind. We don't want to move into that neighborhood.
His name's Birinder. It's like, hey man, you want to come hang out in the garage? I don't know, you got beer in there?
That will create a lot of fear in their mind. We don't want to move into that community.
He says some home builders have paused projects, worried high visibility construction could draw unwanted attention.
And where is this going to end?
Swift radio host and former NLA Ginny Sims says she's hearing similar concerns, with some considering leaving the province.
When you hear businessmen saying, our kids are thinking we should maybe relocate, maybe we should go to another country, then you get worried, because these people spent a long time building themselves up
A new community advisory group is now working with police to improve coordination.
Yeah, the story continues. We have other foreign entrepreneurs from Operation Caribom extorting foreign entrepreneurs from Operation Caribom, and it continues all across Canada. We just got this story today from the Deport Report that Manpreet Singh of no fixed address, that's good that he's here, is currently wanted in a Canada-wide warrant for first-degree unaliving and attempted unaliving with a firearm. That is one of the brothers Singh at work there, showing us how important it is that these foreign entrepreneurs are here in Canada. But America, you don't get to walk away scot-free on this one. We have this clip of American fans of the movie star Pawan Kalyan celebrate the operation of his Telugu language movie. They call him the OG. The milk bath is an ritual. The audience was just as frisky inside the theaters during the movie. It was in the Cinemark Theater, coming to your town soon. Let's get into their behavior that America would not be able to survive without. And these guys are coming to save. Remember, they're here to save Americans from themselves. Without these guys, America couldn't hang in. Just once, I would like to see those guys do a celebration that doesn't involve slime or goop or literal poop or some sort of a messy causing thing. It's just like, can you just celebrate with a cake? Maybe some balloons. Maybe everybody has a glass of champagne. I don't know, something that makes you fit in a little bit better. But yes, that was allegedly in the United States of America. So it looks like Operation Caribom is definitely becoming a problem there too. It was good to be able to cheer on Pierre today and see that there is some leadership at the federal level who understands how important it is that Canada and the U.S. work together, especially as we continue to see these economic updates. But we are going to continue to hold the absolute liberal lunatics accountable that they are manipulating Canadians to be anti-American and pro-China at the same time saying, like, maybe that's not a good thing, but you guys should keep doing it, but it's bad, it's sad. But of course, the mainstream media is very complicit in that manipulation, so they need to be held accountable as well. And obviously, both countries need to work together and shut down Operation Caribom so that we can heal and start to move forward. But if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can also do it directly through YouTube. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.